Hello everyone, my name is Varun and today in this video we are going to discuss in detail about useEffect hook. So before directly diving into the code base, let's first have a conceptual overview of what is useEffect, why do we need it, what is the purpose that it is actually solving. Alright, so before actually diving into the useEffect, let me just give you the overview that what actually React does. The main purpose is React actually renders the UI and it just give the authority to user to interact with the UI, right? There may be a case where user is interacting and user is performing few events, and based on those events, React or we are changing the UI, right? So whenever there is an event and based on that event there is a change in the state, React will start the process of reconciliation and it will re-evaluate the component and its JSX. Based on that, the UI will get updated, right? So here we can see that a component is a combination of state, props, and JSX, and everything is tightly coupled with each other. Now, my question is, what is, where is use effect here? So anything which is out of this particular scope that I have mentioned right now is coming under a use effect hook. Now my point is what actually the use effect do. We can understand it from the documentation because document says that use effect lets us do side effects in a functional component. Wow. So a new term called side effects. So guys, this term is actually taken from a functional programming paradigm. If you look at the React, you will came to know that it is based on a functional paradigm principles where we have concepts like pure functions, we have concepts like immutability, right? Similarly, there is a concept called side effects. So side effects are the things whatever we have discussed about React is related to React, and what else which is pending or anything else which is left is coming under a side effect, right? So let me give you a example with let me show you with the code snippet to understand these side effects in a better way. As you can see on the screen that I have created an array of numbers and there is a function called side effect, and this function is actually pushing a value or pushing an item inside the numbers and returning that numbers array, right? Now from side effect it means that this function is actually updating the value outside of its scope. It is not related to that function. That is not the intended requirement of that function to do. So it is actually modifying the value which is not inside it. So this is what we call as side effect. Similarly, if we add console log inside the side effect function, it will also again be considered as a side effect because console log main purpose is to show the data in the console, right? And it is nothing to do with the side effect method. All right, so these are the two examples. Let me share other examples with you. Let's say I have a component and in that component, clicking on a button, I am changing the title of that document. Of course, that title is not part of that React component and it is actually changing the application state, which is outside the scope of React, right? So that we will call as side effect. Similarly, if we are having a timer functions like set timeout, we will say that it is a side effect because it is a browser API which is running asynchronously. Similarly, if we are making any HTTP or API request from my component, we will call it as a side effect because the part of making an API hit, the part of handling the error and the response is not the intended behavior of that component or React, right? So we will be considering it as side effect. Of course, we are actually going to use those values returned by that API inside my component, and that is a separate part. Similarly, If I am accessing the content from the local storage from my component, even then I will say that it is a side effect. Alright guys, I hope that you have got a basic idea about what does use effect do and what actually are the different side effects, and you got to know that what are the different things that we can have in a use effect hook. Now let's directly dive into the code base to understand this thing in detail, or experiment this thing in detail. So before diving into the code base and using the use effect, let's first look at its specifications. So you can see that use effect hook is taking two parameters. One is going to be a function and another is going to be a dependencies array. So if we talk about a function, it is just an anonymous function where we are actually going to write our side effect related code. The examples can be that I have already mentioned. It can be API hits, timers, or subscriptions, right? Apart from that, now let's move on to dependencies array. Dependencies array are those values based on which I want my anonymous function to execute, right? For example, if I am having a user state and I want that this use effect anonymous method should get executed once there is a change in the user state, right? Then in my dependencies, I will add a dependency called user. Similarly, I can have multiple dependencies, like my function can execute based on multiple, means my function is dependent on multiple inputs from the dependencies, right? Then I will define my dependencies as a array. Okay, now the interesting point here is that if I want my use effect to execute only once, then what should I do? So we can leave this dependencies array blank, which means that this particular use effect is not dependent on anything and it will be executed only once, which is the default behavior of a use effect. So now let's move on to the code base to implement this use effect hook. So guys, you can see that I have already created a use effect component, and if you look at this component right now, it is just saying that use effect example, and here is the UI, and I have included it in my app component. So let's get started. Before diving into the code base for use effect, let me first create a use effect hook. Sorry, let me first create a normal state, and clicking on a button should change that state. So that is my first requirement. So now let me first create button component with on click and update state. Okay, and here let me also give a class name as button and button primary. All right, guys, let me also add setVal as well plus one. So right now this setVal is not available. So let me create a use effect hook called const val and setVal is equal to use state. All right. So now you can see that I have created a button update state. All right, and clicking on that, it will be updating the value of this state. Now let me also create a label class name as form label with margin left of 3 and state as well. All right, guys. So you can see that right now it is appending the values because the default value is a string. So let me change it to 0. So now I have just set my ground. I have created a normal button and there is a state. Clicking on that button is changing my state. So if I click on update state, you can see that state is changing. So now let's now discuss about use effect hook. Before discussing, let me share a problem with you. On execution of this component, what I want is I want to change the title, right? So let's change title. Okay, and there is a convention, there is a document object which is available and with title as title. Okay guys, and now we can call this change title method inside our component, and you can see that title is over there. You look at this title. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually randomly generate the title so that on every re-render it should show a different thing. Okay, and for that what I'm going to use is I'm going to use math.floor math.random. Okay guys, so it is saying that math is not available. Why it is not available? Oops, there is a error in random. All right guys, so you can see that random title random as this. So in the title you can see that right now it is 49. Whenever I'm refreshing, it is changing the title 89, 36, 48, 79, right? Now my point of changing the title, as I have already mentioned that use effect is used to handle side effects, and this is actually a side effect, and I am actually changing the application state. That is, I am changing the document title, right? So now let me click on update state. Guys, you can see clicking on update state button, it is also updating my title. So this is what I want. I just wanted to share the example with you that whenever I'm updating a state, it is calling this method again. Calling this method is again calling the change title, right? So this was the main idea. Now I have a separate requirement. I have a requirement that whenever I am loading a component for the first time, I want to randomly set my title. And after that, I don't want to do anything. Even if I'm keeps on clicking the update state, I don't want this change title to happen, right? So in order to do that, let me take you let me take you to a use effect hook. All right, guys. As I told you that use effect takes two parameter. One is the anonymous function and second one is the dependencies array, right? This anonymous function will execute whenever there is a change in this dependency array. So if I want to change if I want to change the title only at the initial load, as this is the main idea of use effect, it will execute once the component is loaded for the first time, and then whenever there is a change in the state which is there in this dependency array, right? So for this, what I can do is I can add my change title here. And now let me reload my page. So you can see that I am changing the state, but it is not changing the title. So why it is happening? Because I want my use effect, I want the change title to happen only once, and that is why I am providing a blank array. Similarly, you can add more values, like if I want to change, if I want to execute this method even when the value is changing. So what I will do is I will directly add val here, and you can see that changing the state is also changing the title. So that is the first example. Now let me comment it out and let me give you another example where I will show you another thing. So guys, you can see that I am changing the state. What if I also want to change my title? I also want to update my state in this change title. Then what will happen according to you? So I am just going to copy this code and I am going to add it over there. All right. So you can see that it has thrown some kind of error. And if you look at the console, you will figure out that it is saying React limits the number of renders to prevent, okay, the infinite loop. So now why there is an infinite loop? So you can see that on load of this component, I'm calling this change title, and change title is changing the title. Apart from that, it is also updating the state, and we are actually using that state in our component. So once the title is changed, this set val will change the value. Once the value is changed, it will re-render this component again. So it will call it again. Similarly, again, it will look at the change title and it will call change title, and then it will change its title. And then again, it will see that, okay, I have to change the val state. Okay, once this val state is changed, it will again re-render this component, and hence it is getting stuck in the infinite loop. So in order to prevent this situation, we can even use it in this manner. And let me have a set val over here. Now my strategy was, so you can see that right now it is updating the state. It is in infinite loop again. Why? Because I am saying that this is my use effect and you have to listen to the val. Now let me remove this val from this and make it empty. So guys, you can see that on a initial page load, what I wanted was I want to change the title and I want to set the value, set the state val as 1. So this is the entire thing that I have accomplished via this feature. Alright guys. Now this was the example of normal use effect where I want to perform a functionality only for the initial load. Now let's take the example of a timer function, because in timer I am going to explain you about the cleanup thing. So let me create time is equal to set timeout with this and console.log timer, and then okay guys, and I also want to remove this. So you should know that there are two things here. I can use multiple use effects in my component. That is that is possible. Apart from that, I can even skip my dependencies array if required. Okay. So right now what I have done is I have created a set timeout, and set timeout is also part of a side effect. That is why we have put it in use effect. So whenever you are using side effect, guys, you should keep this thing in mind that whenever there is a set timeout, I should clear the timer in its return statement. So useEffect provides me a cleanup phase, which is via a return, and it is actually a method. Okay, and here what I will do is clear timeout with time. So it is a general behavior that whenever I am setting a timer and I want to remove this timer, I will add a clear timeout with this variable time. Now it will clear the timer, and here I am logging clear timer. Okay, so this is the basic functionality we have achieved now. Let me reload the app for the first time, right? You can see that it is first executing clear timer and then timer. Why is it so? It is because it is first executing this use effect, and use effect is changing the title and it is updating the value over there. And then it will also start this timer. So these things are happening one by one, step by step, right? So once this is done, it will re-render the component, and then it will first call my clear timer. So that is the functionality, that this cleanup will happen once there is a another re-render. So in the initial time there was no render. Okay, with this use effect there is a render, and it will first do the cleanup and then it will start this timer. And here you can see that I am also giving 1 second delay. So let me now change the state. See, you can see that changing the state first cleared the event, cleared the timer, and only then it executed this timer. And even let's say I don't want to use, let's say it is 10 ms. Okay, and click on update. So you can see that it is first clearing the timer and only then it is calling this timer. So that is the intended behavior. So guys, one thing you need to keep in mind that whenever I am adding any event handler in my component, what I have to do is I have to assign the event handler in my use effect, and on my cleanup I have to remove my event handler, because if there are different re-renders it will be creating multiple event handlers, and for each re-render will having their own version of the use effect. So you will feel that you will figure out that there is a issue in the application. All right, so now let me remove this code. I have just added this code in order to show you the return statement. Even let's say you want to just remove this timer, okay? And I just want to show you the idea of this cleanup phase. So you can see that first of all there is a timer, and then it will call clear timer and then timer. And let me update the state. You can see updating the state is first calling my cleanup method and only then calling this use effect. It is not making any change in the title right now because uh, okay, it was making change in the title because I have used this change title method. Now let me comment it out now and let me refresh. So you can see that clicking on update state, it is just calling first clear timer and then timer, and it is not calling this use effect method because there is no dependencies. Okay guys, now let's have a API hit with from our component. So for that what we can do is fake API, and you can see that there is a application called there is a website called JSON placeholder, and they are providing us the mock APIs. So if I will be making this API hit, it will be returning with this JSON. Similarly, they have posts. So get request get request to post will return me this data. So we will be using this now. Uh, for that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a API hit in my use effect. So API hit, as I have already mentioned, that API hit is also a use effect. Sorry, is also a side effect. So let me create use effect, and here I will create a, make a API call. For API call, we always use fetch. There is another library called Axios. You can have a look at it. And here, let me directly copy this URL. Okay, and dot then. Oops, let me press enter and dot then, and then there is a response, and there is response dot JSON. All right, guys, and then another, then there will be then and JSON. Oops, JSON, and here what I can do is okay, guys. So I have just made a API hit, and here I'm converting this into JSON. I'm returning this as a JSON. So if I print on console.log JSON, and you can see that it is making the API hit, and here is the result. So you might be wondering that why it has made two API requests, right? It has made two API requests because of this use effect. This use effect changed the value, it re-rendered it, and this component is called two times. That is why there are two API calls. All right. So you can see that I can see all the data. So for now, let me also comment this use effect, and you can see this is the data I have. Now what I want is I want to use this information and I want to display it in my table. So in order to do that, let me create another div, and I am going to name it my post, and here I will create a table, with table head and table row as table head ID. And now let me copy paste it, ID, body, and then title. Oops, there is a error over there. So it is saying that there is a error because there is a missing close div. All right. So right now I have just created a header. For having my to-dos, I need to create a use state const, no to-do, sorry, posts, and set posts is equal to use state with array. And let me reload it. Now what I have to do is I have to add my post via set post. So what I will do is I will call set posts with JSON. Alright guys. So you might be wondering that why it is keeps on calling this API request, right? You can see that it is keeps on calling. Why? Because it is changing the state. So in my use effect, I am changing the state. And whenever I'm changing the state, it is re-rendering it again and again. So now you tell me that how can we prevent this behavior? We can prevent this behavior by just adding a blank array. And now let me reload it. You can see that it has just called it only for the first time. Also, as right now it is returning me 100 records, let's not return the 100 records. I just want to print the first 5 records. So for that, I will be using the splice method with 0 and 5. So what splice does is it just cuts the array 100 and 2, and I'm saying that from 0 to 5th, I want that data. That's it. Alright guys, now I have the data. Now my task is to show this data at the bottom, right? So table head is closed. Now let me create a table body, and here I will be using posts.map and then post index. Uh, all right, and here I will do is table row and then table head index plus 1. Okay, you can see I'm using table head just to highlight it. Okay, and then for rest what I can do is I can use table data, and then there will be post dot title. So how it is post dot title, you can see that if I go to this API hit, there is title and body, and I'm only interested in title and body at this moment. So title is there, and then I will add title dot body. Alright guys, so you can see that in the UI it is saying that you should have a unique key. So let's add unique key also. As I already mentioned that it is not a good practice to use index, you can use nano ID. I have shared this thing in my one of my previous video in a React beginners course. Alright guys, so you can see that we have made a API request in our useEffect hook, and we have shown all the data in this table. So in order to look good, let me also create a class names with table, right? So you can see table is there, and now I am going to add shadow. Shadow is there, and now table hover. Okay, now you can see that it has converted my UI into beautiful table. And also let me add margin top as 5 so that there is a distinction between my post and my table. Alright guys, you can see that we have accomplished our one task. Whenever I am loading my page, I just wanted I just wanted to make a API hit which will return me all the posts in a table. So now let's make another API hit which will return me all the to-dos. So from this API itself, you can see that there is a API for to-dos also. And in this video, we are also going to learn how to make multiple API requests from a single component. So for that, what I'm going to do is I'm just directly going to copy paste it, right? And then let me change the URL, right? And let me create another state for to-dos. Oops. And then set to-dos. All right, guys. So now to-dos is ready. And what I want to do is I have to change it to set to dos. All right. Now my point is how we can show it in the table here. So here also I will be replicating this code as a new row. All right. So let me create another div, and in this div I'm going to create h3 tag with my to dos. So you can see that at the bottom there is my to dos, and let me also center it so it is in the center now. And now I am going to copy this table so it is just showing this old data. Let me change it to ID, title, and status. So you can see that it is returning me ID, title, and status. All right. And let me change from posts to to-dos with to-dos. All right, guys. So now it is saying me ID and title. And for status, you will see that it is returning a boolean true or false, right? So if I will write as completed, it will not show anything because it is just an operation which will get executed, right? So in order to do that, let me also change it to do and then change it to do. All right. So in order to show the actual value, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a ternary operator here. If it is completed and then show completed, and if it is not completed, then I can say it is pending. Okay, guys. So you can see on this screen, I have my posts, I have my to-dos, and in a single component, we have tried to use different use effects. And if I am changing the state, it is not making any API request, another API request, because it is not dependent on anything, right? So guys, I hope that you have understood the concept. Also, it is not advisable to use a blank array. There is a lot of a deeper detail into why we should not use empty array. And if we want to have this particular kind of behavior of executing it only once, there are different ways. Or it is always advisable, like if I am making a change in set post and I can call posts over there, or I can have other way of handling this thing. All right, guys. So we have discussed that whenever we want to have side effects in our application, we will use useEffect hook. And with useEffect hook, it provides me two parameters. There is anonymous function and this dependency array. And if I want this useEffect to execute only once at the initial rendering, then I will leave it blank. Similarly, if I want to do any kind of cleanup, this useEffect is going to return another method which will be called automatically. So it will, before rendering, it will first do the cleanup and then only it will call this useEffect method. right? So this is the intended behavior. Similarly, we have learned that we can make multiple use effects in a single component, and all these use effect methods will be called in a sequence one by one. All right. Apart from that, we learned that we can have different side effects in our application. Like if I want to change the title, I have to add the logic in the use effect. If I want to use timers in my application, I will add that timer in the use effect. All right. And similarly, if there is a application like there is there we are making a socket connection, or we are subscribing or unsubscribing from the event, that thing will be done in the use effect hook itself. Alright guys, I hope that you have liked the idea, you have enjoyed this video. I know that at few places it was a bit complex to understand this stuff, but try to watch this video again and again, try to experiment with this. Only then you will get more clarity of how to do things. Thank you guys.